Hello and welcome to the Passion Driven Pioneers interview series. I'm your host, John Channon, and today I'm joined by Scott Kirchner, who is the founder of InvestWise Capital. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate your time as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. So would you like to just kick us off with a brief background, a little bit of who you are, what you do, and the business that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, born and raised here in Minnesota, where I'm still hanging out. It's a beautiful fall day today, but that means winter is upon us. Yeah, I am married here in Minnesota. I've been married. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary this summer.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Beautiful bride, Morgan, and we've got three little girls that keep us as busy as you can imagine. They're all 8 and under. So a lot of my time is spent, when I'm not working, being an entrepreneur, my time is spent chasing my kids and having a ball with that because the time is small. But when I do find myself down in my office working like I am right now, I'm a multifamily investor and syndicator, focusing primarily on multifamily acquisitions here in the state of Minnesota, with the caveat that my wife and I like to go south in that cold, desolate winter times, and so we do have one short-term rental Airbnb property down in Florida that we own. So,
Well, that's kind of nice. Tell us about what kind of led you to get into this type of business and start this business up, or have you always been in it?
no, I haven't, and that's one of the cool things that I'm excited to share about a bit. So, I actually, like I said, I was born and raised here in Minnesota, and I went to college in southern Minnesota for a bachelor's degree in law enforcement. And I spent my time during college working as what's called a community service officer at a more rural town of about 15, 20,000 people here in southern Minnesota. And so it was a non-sworn position. I handled things like a bike theft report, minor things like that while I was going to college getting my degree to become a licensed police officer in Minnesota. And so I graduated and I pursued that track. And I got hired on as a police officer right out of college. And I spent just over 10 years working as a licensed police officer here in Minnesota, primarily in the metro area, a city called Plymouth, a town of about 80 to 90,000 people, and just had the best opportunities. I was on SWAT. I was a traffic unit officer. I was a DARE instructor, field training officer, got to attend different leadership academies, and really had a ton of fun doing it and genuinely enjoyed what I was doing. Unfortunately, I went to a few suicide calls, some younger kids involved. We were at a point in our lives. Anyone that's a parent that's watching or listening to this knows that when you have kids, your perspective in your life just changes, right? Always for the better, right? But it changes, and it changed my perspective and outlook on life. And I'd gone to a few calls where there was some suicides with some younger people involved, and it was fine. Like, it didn't prevent me from working or anything, but I just kind of said, on the second one standing there, I just remember telling myself, said, yeah, this isn't it for the next 30 years. I don't know what is, but this isn't it. And so, to my wife's credit, right, who's, everyone knows that behind a successful man is a woman pushing, saying, hey, come on, do this, right? And so to my wife's credit, she pushed me and she said, you've been investing in these real estate deals passively and these other people's deals of different asset types. And you're spending your time off as a hobby looking at these and evaluating them. Why don't you make it a career, And I kind of said, yeah, I'd kicked around the idea and thought about it, but I never really got serious about it. And so it's kind of what the impetus was for me to get serious about it and really dig into it. So I had about 5 years of kind of passively investing in other people's deals. And now the last 5 years, I've been running what is InvestWise Capital with 300 units roughly, and couple more under contract. I'm sending out an LOI after this today. So just that's not the most traditional path, but it was certainly it was my path and one that I'm grateful for.
Well, first of all, thank you for your civic duty and serving as a police officer for us.
Thank you. I appreciate
Folks
that.
don't get recognized enough for that. Secondly, though, talk to us a little bit about what that transition was like, where you went from, obviously a full-time job to what was then kind of your side hustle and getting that up and getting that going. What were some of the things you needed to learn? Was there anything that you needed to learn kind of as you were building this?
Yeah, a couple of things. It was kind of like my ugly duckling phase, right? Right when I left law enforcement and broke into commercial real estate full time, because I didn't have enough properties to keep me busy 40 hours a week. I'm a self-admitted workaholic. primarily because I'm passionate about what I do and I enjoy it, right? And so I didn't have the workflow to keep me busy 5 days a week for these work days. And what it forced me to learn actually was more of what I would consider a more I don't know, a better way of being an entrepreneur. And frankly, in that sitting still and that realizing that my work days, Monday through Friday, don't need to be consumed by 40 hours of work. They need to be consumed by the things that need to get done. And then it allowed me the space and time in my life to kind of breathe and find time with my family, to find different hobbies and things like that. It kind of forced me into that. By no intention of mine. But again, it's something that was a great learning curve for me. And frankly, I still at this to this day, 5 years later, I still kind of find myself struggling of like, I'm notorious for getting down a rabbit hole. And so I've become very disciplined and I have a to-do list and I have a calendar and I am religiously married to them because if I'm not, I get down rabbit holes and I waste time. And so I always find myself, back in police work, we had a thing called win, right? You've got to win every situation, win every encounter. And the premise of that was an acronym for what's important now. And so I've carried that over into my business of, well, what's important now? And I find myself grounding back to my to-do list and my calendar saying, what are the things that I need to do that are going to move my the needle for my business forward? What's important now? And that's been the biggest thing that I've had to learn is just to transition that from law enforcement to real estate and entrepreneurship and know that I've got to focus on what's important.
So in the first couple of years, what was important then for your business?
It was just actionable steps in a consistent manner, right? I don't have a background, as I've just explained, I don't have a background of running someone's $300 million portfolio or being an analyst for some massive firm, right? I don't even have a college education in real estate or business, right? And so what was important for me was getting out of my own way and realizing that I'm not just some dumb cop, right? I saw someone posted the other day on, I don't remember what social media, but it was like, hey, just in case you're wondering, there's countless people out there doing things that you're qualified for that they're not qualified for only because they chose to do them, right? And so for me, that was what was important, was realizing that it's not about so much of an education or a degree or a career background. Those things all come together as part of the melting pot to form who you are. But when you just take actionable steps on a consistent basis, that's where you get traction. And that's where you start developing relationships that lead to other opportunities. The first couple of deals that I bought then after I retired from law enforcement, I bought 3 little fourplexes that were all right next door to each other. And I found those all just by cold calling property owners out of the blue. And I happened to land on one guy owned 2 of them and another partnership owned the other one. And they all happened to be willing to sell at the same time because I had identified properties. I started calling people. I started sending letters. And when you take those actions on a consistent basis is what moves things forward for you.
Yeah, deliberate action in the intended direction to get you to your goals, right?
Absolutely.
Good advice there. So let's talk about in your industry,
Yeah.
right? How do you guys stay adaptable to change, or are there any specific strategies you're using to remain innovative? And I don't know if there's innovation in the industry or kind of what's occurring, so.
I'm sure there is innovation in the industry. I'm not as big into plugging a question into AI to have it tell me what markets to buy a property in. I kind of am a little more old school and relying on my own knowledge and market research of an area. But what is changing, or I guess 2 of the biggest obstacles being encountered in specifically multifamily real estate right now, is insurance and lending rates. You used to be able to underwrite, even 4 years ago, you could underwrite insurance at $250 a unit for insurance and be pretty safe. Then it was 500, and now it's anywhere from 500 to 2,000 a unit, and it's a massive swing. If you take 100 units, that swing of $150 a unit times 100 units is a huge, $1,000 swing. It's a massive change to the bottom line of what that building can afford. And in line with that, or kind of running parallel, is the fluctuation and volatility we've had in lending rates, right? Everyone thought the Feds were going to cut rates, which they did just a month ago, and everyone thought rates are going to go down. Well, what seems to have happened is the rate cut from the Feds was already baked into interest rates, and then everyone thought 0.25%, but they actually cut 0.5%, and the markets went, uh-oh, are we in financial trouble? Why'd they cut, 0.25% more than what they thought? And so in order to stay on top of those challenges, because they can completely skew your acquisition of a property in my industry, I am weekly in contact with lenders and insurance providers. What are you seeing? What's going to get me the best opportunity? From a lending or an insurance perspective, something like having sprinkler systems in a building can make or break if you can even find insurance for it right now. So in order to stay on top of those obstacles and challenges within the market and industry that I'm in, you just have to remain connected to your network from a genuine perspective, right? You want to have those genuine natural relationships that allow for information to free flow between you and your service providers and vendors.
Yeah, it's all about the network sometimes.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So how about let's look to the future, right? Could you offer us maybe a little glimpse into your future plans and goals that you have for your business?
Yeah, absolutely. This is where I don't have a great fancy polished, graph and chart, and we're going to grow by this. And here's why, because there are so many ancillary factors that come into my business, such as lending rates, insurance rates, what buildings are on the market, available capital raise and everything, that I'm not ever willing to come out and say, I'm going to buy this many more units per year or in the next 5 years. Obviously, the goal is always to acquire additional properties. But knowing that that's kind of in the forefront of, that's always the goal, is to expand the portfolio. Behind the scenes, I'm working this year to return to kind of my service-oriented focus of servant leadership, that I had as an opportunity as a police officer, serving my community and serving the members of that community. And so in doing that, I'm working to kind of realign a mentorship program that I had started that I'm reworking to allow that opportunity for me to serve others who are looking to get into this field and into this industry that maybe aren't already in it or even in a related field. So that's kind of my goal for the next year here, as well as to continue my service to others within the industry.
Yeah, and I understand kind of what you're saying too, because your business is probably a bit more opportunistic, right? In terms of, what comes available. And then, as you said, it's also influenced by mortgage lending rates and insurance rates and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. So, knowing that this show, right, is targeted towards people who are going to be maybe in the first few years of business, do you have any final thoughts or words of advice you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, I want to come back to something I touched on a little bit earlier of just take those steps, believe in yourself, and know that there are people out in this world that are far less qualified, or whatever you want to consider the qualifications for whatever you're interested in doing. There are people that are less qualified than you are. Just go do it. There's a lot of success stories in America and across our world and globe that show people starting from very little, whether it be knowledge, money, whatever the case may be, availability of opportunities in life, but they just pulled up their boots and they got to it and they started doing it and they built a legacy and an empire that's something that they're proud of and is still here today. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice. I stood in my own way for a few years, and I told myself, those 5 years I was investing in other people's deals, I told myself I could never go buy a $20 million building. But the reality is now 5 years later, I'm sitting here looking at a spreadsheet on my other screen that's a $30 million ground up development that we're looking at doing. So you can do it. And that's the best piece of information, is just go do it. In those first few years, if there's something you're interested in, do your research and take actionable steps towards it.
Well, congratulations, by the way, on 5 years and the success you're having now, because it's that 5 year window where a lot of businesses don't quite make it that far. So congratulations for doing that. And listen, thank you so much for your time today, Scott.
Thanks so much for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was really great meeting you and hearing about your story and your journey. And I really enjoyed that. So I appreciate you sharing that with our audience. And so for everyone watching, I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.